I'm currently in the town of Tzfat, Ira Kodesh Tzfat, in the Galil, the north of Israel, for Shabbos and Yontif. Just want to show you behind me some of the mountains of Miron and Tzfat. And I'd like to share with you a few thoughts about Yontif and Chag HaShavuos. V'atem tiyu li mamleches kohanim b'goy kodesh. That is probably the most remarkable pasuk in chapter 19 of Yisro, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes this transformational promise to Klal Yisrael that from this moment onwards, Klal Yisrael wouldn't anymore be one nation among the other nations, but bli mamleches kohanim, a kingdom of priests, v'goy kodesh, and a nation dedicated to the sacred mission of life. In fact, this whole pasuk is probably the mission statement of Klal Yisrael for the rest of history. But what's interesting is a question which I was looking at in the writings of the Sfas Emes, raised by some of the Mefarshim, that it's a bit unusual that this Chag is called Shavuos. Shavuos simply means, on the face of it, it means weeks. And you would have thought that there'd be something a bit more substantial, a name to give to this Yontif, if it's a Yontif of Kabbalas HaTorah, receiving the Torah and transforming Klal Yisrael into a nation of Kedusha. Why call it weeks? It's true there are 7 weeks leading up to it, but that surely is not the essential factor of the Yontif. Says the Sfas Emes something totally remarkable. It says, in actual fact, there is a hidden meaning here. There are Shavuos that are weeks, but there is another meaning, and that is not Shavuos, but Shavuos. Shavuos means, is the plural of the word Shavuot, which means an oath. It means a promise. It means a covenant. And Shavuos means there was an exchange of vows, an exchange of promises between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael. And indeed, this phrase is used in the Gemara in a few places. For example, in Maseches Nedarim, the Gemara speaks about Mushba v'omeid mehar Sinai, that Klal Yisrael are already sworn to keep the mitzvahs from Har Sinai. So therefore, Har Sinai was a moment of Shavuot on the part of Klal Yisrael, and a reciprocal Shavuot from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What were these two oaths? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to them, if you accept the Torah, you will become this unique nation with this unique mission statement. And Klal Yisrael made the Shavuot of Na'aseh v'Nishma. And that is the Shavuos. That is the exchange of vows which really constituted the Nisuin, conceptually the marriage between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael, and it was the unbreakable bond and the dual covenant of this Yontif. And that is really what this Yontif is about. It's not about the weeks, it's about the vows that took place, which are still in force today, ensuring the uniqueness of Klal Yisrael and our commitment to Torah and mitzvahs. That's once a year, the Shavuos. The bracha that represents this idea more than any other brachas that we say daily is the bracha shebochabanu mikol ha'amim v'nosan lanu es Torosei. The bracha that we make, which is Birkas HaTorah. We make this bracha daily in the morning, and if we get called up to the Kriyas HaTorah in Shul, we make it a second time. And that connects together. And it's interesting, that's a bracha which connects together both Asher Bochabanu, which is the chosenness and uniqueness of Klal Yisrael as the Goy Kodesh, and Nosan Lano as Torah, so that we received from HaKadosh Baruch Hu the Torah, and we were committed to keep it. What's interesting is, I'd just like to have a look at for the moment, the brachas of Birkas HaTorah is an appropriate topic to look at for Chag HaShavuos. And one of the interesting features of the brachas is that all other brachas, all of the mitzvahs, when we make a bracha on a mitzvah, we say one bracha. Right, Litzate Batzites, we say a bracha Lishma Kol Shofar on the Tilas Lulav. Suddenly here, on the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, we make 3 brachas. Why is it that we make 3 brachas? The Gemara in Brachas, Daf Yud Aleph, speaks at length about what the brachas are, and then in the end, the Gemara concludes in Emrenu Lekulu that we should say all 3 of them. But surely it's something remarkable that we say 3 brachas daily on one mitzvah. And there is here lots of very interesting ideas. The Marshal there in Bracha speaks about it at some length. I'd like to have a look at something very fascinating, which is connected, I think, to our appreciation and our commitment to the learning of Torah. First of all, it's interesting to note the Rambam writes in Hilchos Brachas that of all the brachas that we say the whole year round, every single bracha of any shape and size can be divided up into three categories, he says. There are only three categories of brachas. There are birkas ha-mitzvahs, the bracha which is the preamble to performing a mitzvah, sheikh yishonim tosim tzivonu, right? Al natilas yadayim, lisatik batzitzis, al natilas lulav. That's one type of bracha. And then there is birkas nehenin, the brachas that we make before deriving any pleasure from this world. That's all birkas nehenin. And then there is a third bracha called birkas hashevach, brachas which are simply praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They're not connected to a particular mitzvah, nor are they a preamble to enjoying the world. It's simply a praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a bracha like, for example, Shechianu v'kiyamonu v'giyanu, a bracha like Osa Ma'asa Bereshis. These, says the Rambam, are the three categories of brachas, and every single bracha has to be categorized under one of these concepts, and each concept has actually got different laws to it. Exactly how you're moitzi other people and how you are yotzi yourself, etc. I won't go into that for the moment. But what's interesting is these three types of brachas. Whenever we make a bracha, we, in a sense, have to choose what type of bracha we're making. With one exception. When it comes to Talmud Torah, what you see in the Mefarshim, the Levush speaks about it, Reb Kanievsky and Kilas Yaakov speaks about it, the Steipler Gaon, that in actual fact, when it comes to Talmud Torah, we are making all three brachas that we make is one of each category. The first thing you make is a sheikh yishonim says it's one of lasei b'divrei Torah. That's a straightforward birkas ha-mitzvah. We're about to engage in a mitzvah, one of the Tariq mitzvahs of Talmud Torah. We make a bracha, a birkas ha-mitzvahs. Now this is going to be, I'm not just simply going to open a Chumash or open a Gemara. I'm not just reading ancient texts. I'm engaging and understanding the Dvar Hashem. That's a mitzvah. And therefore we say lasei b'divrei Torah. The next bracha, and here comes the interesting bit, the next bracha is birkas nehenin, says the Lavush and the Kilas Yaakov, that in actual fact there's a special dimension of the mitzvah of learning Torah which is not true about any other mitzvah. And that is that there is a special mitzvah not just to engage in it, but a mitzvah to derive real pleasure from it. That it should be v'ha'arevno. That ha'arevno means it should be enjoyable, it should be pleasant, it should be a wonderful experience. And therefore we need to make a bracha which is a birkas ha-nehenin, a bracha like we make a bracha on Bar Pri Agafen. We make a bracha v'harev no Hashem lakeinu divrei seroscha b'finu, that these words of the Torah should be geschmack, should be pleasurable, should be a simcha for us. In actual fact, there is something very interesting connected to Shavuot on this topic, and that is the ancient minhag that Klal Yisrael have to eat milk products on Shavuot. It's a little bit of a mystery exactly where this minhag came from. I don't think there are any sources for it before the 13th century. There's certainly nothing in the Mishnah, the Gemara, or the Rambam on the issue of milk products connected to Shavuos. But starting from the 13th century, there is, particularly in Ashkenaz, it's mentioned in the Kolboi in the 13th century, one of the early Rishonim, and various other chiburim of minhagim and halachas, that eating dairy products, what is that about? There are lots of different reasons given to it. But the original Mefarshim that speak about it connect it to a pasuk in Shir Hashirim, Devash v'cholov tachas l'shoneich, where the pasuk there says about Kadosh Baruch Hu is speaking in Shir Hashirim to his beloved and saying milk and honey tachas l'shoneich under your tongue, and Chazal in Medrash connect that to Matan Torah. That when Klal Yisrael said Na'aseh v'nishma, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to them, Devash v'cholov tachas l'shoneich, that the milk and the honey is tachas l'shoneich, is you with your tongue, with your words, with your utterance, you have accepted upon yourself first the mitzvah, but in addition to the mitzvah, you accepted a mitzvah, an activity which is devash v'cholov, which is masukim midvash v'nofes tzufim, as the pasuk says in Tehillim Yud Tes, when we speak about Teres Hashem Tamima, and then we say, Anechamodim Izov Mipazarov, Umusukim Midvash Venofes Tzufim, the words of Torah are not only Tamima and Ne'emona and Machimas Pesi, they are also the highest level of enjoyment possible. Comes from engaging in an understanding of Torah, the depths of Torah, the ideas of Torah. They are all Masukim Midvash. Why Cholov and Dvash? So here's an interesting Perush. That Cholov and Dvash are really two different types of foods, two different types of nutrients. Cholov, meaning milk, particularly the mother's milk, is in order to build up the body and the limbs and the bones, and to make sure that life itself it can function. The life in fact itself comes into being, and that is the cholov, is the fundamental food of growth, physical growth. And that is the aspect of Torah which is Kehem Chayenu V'Erech Yomeinu, on which our lives are built. But then there is Dvash. Dvash is actually not an essential nutrient, but Dvash is a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for us to enjoy the Masukim Midvash V'Nofes Tzufim, the sweetness of honey and the sweetness of the sweet fruits. This is a special gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us, and the Torah itself contains both of these types of enjoyments. Both the enjoyment of the fundamental life-giving force of Torah, and then there is the geschmack, there is the enjoyable aspect over which we make birkas nehenin, and that, says the Kolboy, is the origin of the mitzvah to, the minhag rather, to have milky products on Shavuos. And incidentally, it's not by chance also that when the Torah comes to praise the land of Israel, it's praised as the land of Eretz Zovas Cholov Udvash, a land flowing with milk and honey, and that is an allusion to the idea that within Eretz Yisrael, the enjoyment of Torah and the depth of Torah takes on a special dimension of Kedusha. So here we have two out of the three brachas. The first one is the doing of the mitzvah. The second is the birkas nehenin, the enjoyment of the mitzvah. And then there is the third one, that is not a birkas ha-mitzvah, nor birkas nehenin. That is birkas ha-shevach. That is the ultimate praise that we give to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we were chosen and we were given the privilege of becoming the Am Hashem, and we were given the covenant of Atem Tiyu Li Mamleches Kohanim V'Goy Kodesh. And this was the Shavuos. This was the exchange of vows, which we renew every year, and we will be renewing this year again on the Chag Shavuos, Zman Matan Teresenu, that these vows are as valid today as they always were. And Bez Hashem, we should continue to enjoy the pleasure and the extreme Masikus Hadvash, the sweetness of Divrei Torah, the truth of Torah, the depth of Torah, the relevance of the Torah ideas. All this is part of its sweetness and its pleasure. V'chein yirot.